They stood at the edge of Dead Mare Bluff, boots sinking into red dust, the wind whipping through the sagebrush like an omen. The sky above was rust-colored, burning with the final light of a dying sun, and the townsfolk gathered close, their eyes sharp with judgment, their mouths dry from thirst and fury. Women clutched rosaries and held children back by the collar. Men spat tobacco and muttered curses under their breath. A baby cried somewhere in the crowd, its wailing lost beneath the preacher's trembling voice. Clarabelle stood tall, her wrists bound in front of her with frayed rope, dress torn and smeared with canyon grit. Her lip bled. Her hair, once carefully pinned, now blew wildly across her face. But her eyes held no fear, only defiance. The preacher stepped forward, Bible clutched tight in one hand, the other raised to the sky. "This woman," he cried, voice cracking like old timber, "has given herself to sin, to filth, to the devil's rider himself. She has turned her back on decency, on law, on the will of God." A low growl rippled through the gathered crowd. Sheriff Brant stood near the edge, silent, hands resting heavy on his belt. His hat shaded his eyes, but the curve of his mouth spoke enough. He enjoyed this. Clara didn't blink as the preacher's voice rose. She didn't flinch when someone threw a rock that missed her shoulder by inches. She didn't speak. "I saw them," said old Mrs. Calhoun, her voice shrill, "riding together at sunset, laughing, like a pair of heathens. You'd have thought she was his wife." Clara turned slowly to face her, eyes cold. "My husband died 2 years ago with a bullet in his back, and no one in this town lifted a finger. Don't speak to me of marriage." That earned her a slap from Sheriff Brant. "You don't talk unless we ask." Blood welled on her cheek, but Clara only smiled, small, bitter, as though the pain confirmed something she already knew. The crowd shifted uneasily. Behind Clara, the bluff dropped straight down into the canyon, 200 feet of red rock and shadow. The wind moaned through it, like something alive. The place had earned its name long ago, when a wild mare bolted during a thunderstorm and vanished over the edge. Since then, they said, the land had a thirst. Sheriff Brant stepped forward. "You've got one last chance, Clara. Tell us where he is. Where Jesse Calhoun's hiding. Maybe we'll spare you." Clara laughed. A dry, crack sound that didn't match the fear they expected. "You think this is about Jesse?" That rattled him. Just a flicker. He motioned with his hand. The men beside her moved forward, rough hands grabbing her arms. They dragged her to the edge as the preacher continued his sermon, voice drowned now by the wind and the rising chaos in the crowd. Clara looked over her shoulder one last time. She saw the town of Dustwell in the distance, its crooked church steeple, its broken fences, its windows full of watching eyes. A place that buried truth and burned justice. A place that never wanted her, even before Jesse. Her boots scraped rock as they forced her forward. She didn't scream when they pushed. She fell like a stone, hair snapping behind her like a banner. And then nothing. No scream. No thud. Just silence. The crowd waited. A few leaned over the edge, squinting down into the mist. Did she hit? No one could see through the shadows. The canyon below was swallowed in low-lying fog that had rolled in off the river earlier that evening, thicker than anyone had seen in years. The preacher closed his Bible with a snap. "The Lord is judged." The sheriff stared over the bluff a little longer, his mouth twitching. Then he nodded, tipped his hat, and walked away. Behind him, the crowd began to disperse, dragging their children, their curses, and their shame with them. But down below, hidden by boulders and mist and silence, Clarabelle was very much alive. She dangled inches above the rock floor, her weight held in arms that trembled but did not break. Jesse Calhoun gritted his teeth as he slowly lowered her down from the ledge, his back pressed against the canyon wall, one hand gripping a rope looped around a buried anchor, the other wrapped around her waist. When her feet touched the ground, she let out a long breath and dropped to her knees. "Damn," she whispered. "You cut that close." "I was watching the sun," he said. "Didn't think they'd do it so fast." Clara looked up at him, her lip twitching. They were always going to do it. He knelt beside her, brushing dirt from her cheek. "You all right?" She touched her own face, winced. They slapped me. Jesse's jaw tightened. I saw. Around them, shadows moved. From the fog emerged 3 more figures, silent, watchful. One was a black man in a priest's coat, holding a sawed-off shotgun with strange reverence. Another, younger, wore a broad hat and held twin revolvers. The third was a woman, tall, scarred, carrying sticks of dynamite like kindling. She nodded once at Clara and passed her a flask. Clara took it, drank deep, and wiped her mouth. They'll think I'm dead. Jesse helped her to her feet. Then let's make sure they wish that were true. Above, Dustwell's lanterns flickered to life. Below, vengeance gathered its breath. The fire crackled low in the heart of the gulch, painting flickers of orange across the canyon walls like ghosts passing through. Jesse Calhoun sat with his back to the stone, his hat pulled low and his eyes fixed on the flames. He hadn't said a word since they pulled Clara from the mist, but his silence was louder than any sermon the preacher could shout. His hands, scarred, calloused, deadly, tightened around the tin cup of black coffee he hadn't touched. Clara sat across from him, arms folded, shoulders tense. Her lip was swollen, the bruise on her cheek darkening to violet, but her gaze burned clear. They think I'm dead, she said finally, voice low. Maybe we should let them believe it. Ride south. Find a place where a woman ain't judged for who she loves. Jesse looked up slowly. His green eyes were sharp, cold as morning frost, but something flickered there. And let them keep their lies buried? Let them spit on your name like they spat on your husband's grave. She said nothing, but the look in her eyes was answer enough. Bootsteps crunched behind them. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, skin like polished ebony, wide shoulders wrapped in a long black coat, a silver cross swinging against his chest. He was Reverend Elijah Black, once a man of the cloth, now a man of vengeance. He crouched beside the fire, resting his sawed-off on his knee. They killed a good man, Clara, and they blamed it on whiskey and bandits. But you and I know better. I know, she murmured. They said Tom got drunk, wandered off, died in the canyon. She looked at Jesse, but Jesse found his body, and a bullet in his back. Sheriff Brandt's doing, Jesse muttered. Same caliber he carries. Town covered it up. Your husband knew about the mine. Elijah nodded slowly. That silver vein under Dustwell's church? It's deep. Runs right through that hill. Your man found it. Brandt and the mayor couldn't let him keep that truth. Clara swallowed hard. Her hand drifted to the necklace under her collar, a token Tom had given her, a keepsake she never stopped wearing, even after Jesse. The preacher leaned in closer. This isn't just about revenge anymore. That town's built on bones and blood. We bring it down. We bring the truth up with it. A sudden whistle cut the air. Soft, bird-like. Jesse turned his head and raised a hand. From the rocks above, a shadow dropped like a falling star. A young man landed in a crouch, wrapped in a deer-hide cloak, long hair braided with copper beads. His eyes were dark, watching everything. He said nothing as he stepped forward and handed Jesse a folded scrap of paper. Jesse read it and grunted. Crow Ridge gang rode in tonight. Brandt's hired guns. Probably sniffing for my trail. Clara's heart sank. They'll search the canyon. They won't find us, said a voice from deeper in the dark. A woman appeared, half lit by firelight, with a long fuse tucked behind her ear and her fingers stained black with powder. Esme Cortez. She dropped a bundle of dynamite beside the fire like it was bread from the oven. Not if we leave a few surprises behind. Dynamite in a canyon. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Only enough to scare him off, she said. Unless they're stupid. They're stupid, Jesse said flatly. Clara looked around at the strange collection of souls seated in that hidden hollow. The blind sharpshooter Thomas Crane resting against a stone with a rifle across his knees. The preacher with fire in his voice and a shotgun in his hands. Esme, the powder witch, half mad from war and widowing. The silent scout from the Red Mesa, name unknown, eyes older than the desert. And Jesse, with a bounty on his head and a wound in his heart. How did this become my army? She whispered. Jesse stared into the fire. You fell from a cliff and didn't scream. That makes you the fiercest among us. She let a long breath out. They killed Tom to hide that silver. Then they threw me over the edge like trash. You think we can actually turn Dustwell inside out?" "We ain't just turning it," said Elijah. "We're burning it." Jesse stood. His shadow stretched long behind him. "We ride tomorrow. We go back through Widow's Pass and into town before dawn. Clara leads. Her face will freeze them long enough for us to start talking. Truth comes out in daylight." Thomas, the blind gunman, tilted his head. "And if they don't listen?" Jesse's voice was calm. "Then they'll listen to lead." Clara rose, her breath steadying. "They'll listen to me," she said. "This town buried my husband. They buried the truth. And they tried to bury me." A silence settled over the group. The fire hissed as a log shifted. The scout flicked a pebble into the flames and spoke for the first time, voice dry and smooth. "Dustwell is a wound. Time to lance it." No one argued. Later that night, Jesse and Clara sat on a rock ledge above the fire, watching stars shimmer in the cut of the sky. "I thought you were dead," he said softly. She leaned against him, closing her eyes. "When they pushed me, I thought of Tom. Then I thought of you. And I was angry I wouldn't get to tell you you're a damn fool." Jesse chuckled, then quieted. "We could still run, you know. Head south. New Mexico. Leave this all behind." Clara opened her eyes. "You think I want to spend the rest of my life with a man who lets liars sleep easy?" "No," he admitted. "You want blood and thunder." "I want justice," she said. "For Tom. For what they did to us. And I want to see Brant's face when he sees I'm not a ghost." They sat in silence after that. Just the stars and the sound of the wind brushing through the rocks. And far above, on the bluff where Clara had fallen, the town of Dustwell slept, unaware that the woman they thought dead was coming back, not as a victim, but as a storm. The hooves struck the dirt like war drums, muffled under the cloak of night. The town of Dustwell lay nestled in the crook of the hills, quiet and dreaming beneath a haze of lantern glow and desert moonlight. Its streets, once crawling with gossip and grit, now breathed a dangerous calm. The wooden buildings looked harmless from a distance, church steeple tall and proud, saloon windows glowing warm, but every corner held shadows that remembered blood. Clara Bell led the ride, her eyes fixed on the town like she could burn it down just by looking. Her dress was tucked into riding pants, her braid swung heavy against her back, and in the saddle she moved with a steadiness born of rage more than grace. Behind her came Jesse, rifle strapped to his back, silence heavy on his shoulders. The others fanned out across the ridge, Elijah with his cross flashing in the dark, Thomas Crane, eyes sightless, but every other sense sharpened to a blade, and the scout, who rode like wind-given flesh. Esme rode rear, one hand resting lazily on a satchel of explosives. There was no need for chatter. They all knew what tonight was. A reckoning. They split up near the outer edge, where the scrub brush thinned, and the land fell quiet. Jesse peeled off toward the old well behind the blacksmith's barn. Clara turned her mare toward the northern end, toward a house with faded blue shutters and a porch swing that still creaked in the wind. Her sister's house. The door opened before she knocked, and stood there barefoot, a candle in one hand, lips parting like she'd seen a ghost. "You," she breathed. "You were dead." Clara stepped forward. "That's what you told them, isn't it?" And shrank back, eyes wide. I didn't know they'd throw you, Clara. I thought they'd lock you up. I thought they'd scare you into running." "You knew what they were, what Brant is, and you handed me over anyway. I was protecting our name, and whispered, after what you did, what you were doing with that outlaw." Clara's voice was low and steady. "The only outlaw in this town is the one wearing a badge." Anne's eyes shone, whether from candlelight or guilt. Clara didn't care. She turned to go. "They'll kill you if they see you," and called after her. Clara didn't stop walking. Let them try. Across town, Jesse crouched by the well. The boards had warped, but the earth still remembered. He dug with a rusted shovel, boots grinding into the dry soil. Thomas stood a few feet away, face tilted to the wind. "There's something under there," the blind man murmured. "I can smell it. Iron and rot." Jesse hit something hard. Wood. He scraped it back, and the stench rose like a ghost from a coffin. He pulled the boards apart and uncovered a shallow grave. Bones wrapped in burlap. A ring glinting on a withered hand. "Tom Bell," Jesse muttered. "Right where I figured." He didn't say the rest. Didn't say that the body had been moved, that Tom had been dumped here like garbage. Didn't say that Brant likely stood over the hole while it was covered, whistling a hymn. Thomas turned his head, listening. "We need to leave." You stirred the dust. Jesse covered the bones again. "We don't leave. We finish." Down the road, Elijah stood at the foot of the church steps, staring up at the painted windows. The same steps where he once preached about salvation before they burned his chapel outside town and branded him a heretic. He touched the wood now like greeting a long-lost enemy. Inside, Esme had already broken into the mayor's office through a back window. Her boots landed soundlessly on the floor as she moved past a desk piled with ledgers and false receipts. She lit a match with her teeth, held the flame to the edge of a curtain, then changed her mind and snuffed it out. Not yet. She opened a drawer. Maps. Silver outs. Signed confessions. Names of every man paid off to keep their mouths shut. She tucked them into her vest and vanished into the dark again. By midnight, the group gathered in the ruins of the old livery stable. Moonlight streamed through broken beams. Clara tossed the sheriff's name into the center of the room, like a match. "He's the one who killed Tom." "No doubt," Jesse said. "Mayor paid him off. They buried the silver and blamed the murder on whiskey and wild dogs." Esme handed over the papers. "Proof. Enough to ruin them all." Elijah looked around the room. "Then tomorrow we bring it to the people." "They won't believe us," Thomas said. "Not all of them." "They'll believe her," Jesse said, looking at Clara. "They threw her off a cliff. And she's back." But before anyone could speak, a whistle rang out, sharp and urgent. The scout dropped from the rafters. "Riders," he said. "North Ridge. 20, maybe more." Jesse cursed under his breath. "Crow Ridge gang. They're here for blood," the scout said. "Paid well. Trained hard. They'll be in town by dawn." Thomas added, "We've got hours." "Maybe." Clara stood. Her shadow stretched long behind her in the firelight. "Then we show Dustwell what kind of ghosts we are." In the sheriff's office, Mayor Talbot looked out the window as torchlight flickered along the hills. "She's alive," he muttered. "God help us." Behind him, Sheriff Brant spat into a spittoon. "Let her come. She wants truth. I got bullets that'll speak louder." He smiled with yellow teeth. "One for her, one for Jesse, and one for every rat that rides with them." Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping across the dry land like a warning. Dustwell slept, but dawn was coming, and with it hell. The sun had barely scraped the horizon when the first shot cracked through the canyon, like thunder off stone. Birds exploded from the cliffs. Dust hung suspended in the pale light. Jesse's horse reared, hooves slamming into the rocks, as bullets chewed through the narrow pass ahead. "Ambush!" he shouted, diving from the saddle as the Crow Ridge gang poured out from behind boulders like rats from a hole. Gunfire echoed, ricocheting off the canyon walls in a deadly chorus. Clara hit the ground hard, her hand scraped and trembling. The rifle Jesse had given her clattered beside her. She stared at it, chest heaving. All around, chaos erupted. The scout darted between shadows like smoke, firing short, sharp bursts that dropped men with eerie precision. Thomas Crane sat cross-legged behind a fallen log, turning his head to each sound, each footfall, each sharp breath, and hitting targets like he could see their sins. Jesse barked orders, voice rough with sand and fury. "Push left. Draw him in. Esme the bridge." Esme was already climbing. The old rope bridge spanned the back edge of the canyon, fraying and swaying with age. She reached the middle, pack clinking with the weight of black powder. Below her, riders charged toward the pass. Clara's breath came in short, panic bursts. A bullet struck the stone inches from her head. She grabbed the rifle with unsteady hands, tried to aim. Her shoulder screamed, and her vision blurred with fear. Another shot. This one closer. A Crow Ridge rider emerged from behind a rock, grinning, his revolver trained on Jesse. Clara didn't think. She just screamed and pulled the trigger. The sound roared in her skull. The recoil knocked her back. The rider dropped, dead before he hit the ground. Jesse turned, eyes wide, then locked with hers. He nodded once, grim and grateful. High above, Esme lit the fuse with a trembling hand. She looked down, saw Clara raise the rifle again, saw Jesse limping now, blood soaking through his side. She smiled. The explosion tore the morning wide open. Fire bloomed across the rope bridge in a flash of fury and smoke. Wood splintered, cables snapped, and bodies fell screaming into the gorge. Clara watched Esme disappear in the blast, her silhouette swallowed by flame. The dust settled, silence returning like a gasp. Jesse staggered, caught himself on a boulder. "We need to move," he hissed through gritted teeth. Blood ran down his leg, dark and fast. Clara rushed to his side. "You're hit." "Not bad." His knees buckled. "Bad enough." She slung his arm over her shoulder, hoisting him up. "We go to the church." Jesse blinked. "Clara." "No arguments." Her voice was hard now. "You said the ledges were there. The truth. That's where we end this." The others gathered around, singed and bloodied. Elijah stood with his shotgun cradled in his arms, eyes burning with holy fire. The scout wiped blood from his blade without a word. Thomas touched Clara's shoulder. "You did good," he said. "You're one of us now." She didn't answer, just looked to the ridge, where Esme had vanished. Then she turned toward town, fire lighting her steps. Behind her, Jesse limped forward, flanked by ghosts and outlaws. Dustwell awaited, and so did reckoning. The church bell tolled once, long, hollow, and wrong, ringing not for worship but for reckoning. Rain fell in thin sheets, soft at first, like the sky itself held its breath. Dustwell streets, once parched and sun-split, turned dark with mud. Lanterns swung in doorways. Curtains shifted. Slowly, they came, boots thudding on wet wood, whispering, glancing over shoulders like ghosts might be following. Clara stood on the church steps, soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. One side of her face was bruised. The other bore a scar that hadn't been there 2 days ago. In her hand she held the ledgers, bound in cracked leather, pages stained with blood, ink, and guilt. She didn't speak yet. She just let them look at her, this woman they'd thrown to her death. "I was never the one who needed forgiving," she said at last, voice steady as the thunder rolling over the hills. The crowd was quiet. The mayor stood near the back, pale beneath his wide-brimmed hat, flanked by 2 deputies who couldn't meet her eyes. Sheriff Brandt was nowhere in sight. Clara opened the book and read. Names, dates, signatures. "Tom Bell," she said. "My husband. Shot in the back for finding silver under the church. Murdered by your sheriff. His grave hidden. His body dumped like garbage." Murmurs broke the silence. Someone gasped. She flipped a page. Money. Payments made to Mayor Talbot. Brandt. The preacher. Anyone who could keep quiet while they carved out the land beneath us. Talbot took a step forward. "You have no proof those are real." Jesse appeared beside her then, limping, soaked, hat pulled low over his face. He tossed something down the church steps. A gold ring, caked in old blood. "Found it with Tom's bones," he said. "Along with this." He held up a bullet casing. "Same caliber the sheriff carries." The mayor's jaw tightened. "This is slander." Elijah moved through the crowd like a storm, shotgun slung over his back, his voice cutting the air. "This is truth, and you're about to drown in it." More townsfolk gathered, women who had lost sons, miners who had never been paid fair, men who had known something foul was under their feet, but never dared dig. Clara stepped down, the ledger still open in her hands. "You let them hang Jesse Calhoun's name on every crime they committed. But Jesse, he never robbed, never killed for pleasure. He tried to expose them, and they buried him." The church doors creaked open behind them. Thomas emerged, rifle resting across his chest. The scout followed, silent, eyes scanning the ridge. That was when the thunder changed. Not from the sky, but from hooves. The Crow Ridge gang rode in hard, bullets flying before the first boot hit the ground. The townsfolk scattered, screaming. Jesse pulled Clara behind a stone column as bullets slammed into the steps. The gang's leader dismounted with a grin that split his face in half. His name was Varn. He wore black leather and brass rings and had a face like a cracked knuckle. He pointed his revolver straight at Jesse. "You got a lot of nerve dragging this corpse of a town into your business." Jesse stepped forward, barely steady, rain streaming down his brow. "You came for money. This ain't your fight." "Wrong," Varn sneered. "You got a price on your head, and I collect what's mine." He raised his pistol, but the shot didn't come from him. It came from Clara. The revolver kicked back in her hand, Jesse's revolver, the one they'd said belonged to the Devil's Rider. Her aim was steady this time. Varn dropped before he could finish his smirk, the rain darkening the blood already pooling at his chest. The gang hesitated, looking at each other. Then the scout whistled a sharp, deadly note, and within seconds, bullets whined from the shadows. Crane fired from the bell tower. The townsfolk, half shocked, half awake, began shouting and chasing the remaining riders off the edge of town. When the shooting stopped, the street was wet with more than just rain. Clara stood there, panting, the pistol still raised. Jesse touched her shoulder. "That was mine," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered, "but it felt like it belonged to me." He nodded once, then stepped away. The crowd gathered again, dazed, silent. Someone lifted the ledger from the mud. Others stared at the mayor, who was backing toward the church. "I didn't shoot anyone," he stammered. "I didn't." Thomas's voice cut through. "You paid the ones who did. You signed the pages. There's enough ink in that book to drown you." The mayor broke. He tried to run. Elijah knocked him cold with the butt of his gun. Clara turned to Jesse then, her face unreadable. "You should tell them," she said. "The truth." He hesitated. The rain softened. "My name isn't Jesse Calhoun," he said, voice gravel low. "Jesse was my brother, the real outlaw. He tried to make things right. He died trying. I took his name to finish what he started." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but no one moved. "I knew," Clara said quietly. "I always knew." He looked at her, stunned. "I loved you anyway." The bell rang once more, soft and slow. A woman in the back crossed herself. Someone began to weep. Then the clouds broke, and the sun came through. The rain washed Dustwell clean for the first time in years. Blood, soot, and silver-tinted lies all bled into the dirt as the sun climbed over the ridge, casting gold across broken rooftops and swollen faces. The townsfolk moved slowly that morning, as if waking from a long, fevered dream. Doors creaked open. Curtains no longer fluttered to hide guilty eyes. In the town square, the church bell hung crooked from its tower, still ringing faintly whenever the wind caught it just right, like it, too, had something left to say. Mayor Talbot's body lay uncovered, face down in the dust. No one stepped forward to move him. Clara stood at the edge of town, the rising light catching the scar on her cheek and the steel in her eyes. Her hat was pulled low, Jesse's revolver resting on her hip like it had always belonged there. Her boots were still caked in the mud of the church steps, but her spine was straight and her voice, when she spoke, quiet and firm. "I'm not staying." The people gathered in a loose ring around her, farmers, widows, shopkeepers, even children now quieted by the weight of what they'd seen. Guilt clung to them like dust that wouldn't scrub off. Some cried. Others just looked at the ground. "You saved this town," old Mr. Langley said, clutching his hat in trembling hands. "We didn't deserve it, but you did." "I didn't do it for the town," she replied. "I did it for Tom, for Jesse, and for every name they tried to bury." A murmur of shame passed through the crowd, and stood a little apart, tears streaking her face. Clara looked at her for a long moment but said nothing. Some wounds couldn't be spoken over. Jesse leaned against the rail of the saloon, arm wrapped in a sling, his hat shadowing a tired grin. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "You coming?" "I never said I wasn't." The others were already saddled. Elijah Black rode in silence, eyes lifted to the sky like he still expected lightning. Thomas Crane sat straight-backed on his horse, listening to the world beyond what others could hear. The scout waited at the front, still and silent as dusk. There was no sign of Esme, just the echo of her laughter in Clara's memory and a hill of rock marking where the bridge once stood. The townsfolk tried one last time. "We could rebuild," someone said. "We need someone like you." "You had someone like me," Clara said, "and you threw her off a cliff." She mounted her horse without looking back. The group rode slow at first, the town shrinking behind them. The wind rose over the hills, soft and warm, whispering across the flatlands and canyons like a voice long unheard. Dustwell didn't wave, didn't cheer, just watched, silently. By the time they reached Deadmere Bluff again, the sun was high and the air smelled of sage and heat. Clara dismounted and walked to the edge, boots kicking the same red dust they'd once tried to bury her in. The wind caught her braid and lifted it behind her like a banner. She looked down the sheer drop and remembered the silence, how it swallowed her whole, how the fall never ended. "You were supposed to die here," Jesse said, coming up beside her. "I did," she replied, "but something else crawled up out of that canyon." He didn't argue. The others waited quietly behind them, letting the wind speak. Clara closed her eyes. For a moment, she could almost hear Esme's voice, feel Tom's hand in hers. She placed a small silver button on the edge of the cliff, a piece from his coat, and stepped away. Then she mounted her horse. They rode out not as heroes, not as fugitives, but something else entirely, carved by fire, tempered by betrayal, bound by the kind of justice that couldn't be written in books or preached from pulpits, the kind you lived or died proving. In the years that followed, stories grew like weeds across the West. Some said they robbed trains, but only the ones carrying gold from corrupt banks. Others claimed they freed entire towns from crooked lawmen. A few whispered about ghosts riding at their side, especially her. They called her the Cliff Bride. They said she wore a revolver that once belonged to the Devil's Rider and that her bullets never missed. They said she'd once been thrown to her death and had landed in legend instead. And on stormy nights, when the wind howled through the bluffs like it remembered pain, folks still claimed they could see a figure on horseback standing at the edge, hair flying wild, eyes sharp as a hawk's. They say she rides with ghosts now, a widow with a heart of fire and a gun that never misses.